Here's the two options you have today as a believer. You can humble yourself before God by casting your cares on Him, or you can pride yourself and grow in your arrogance by keeping your cares to yourself. I've heard many people say, well, I didn't want to bother God with that. Maybe you've said that in your life. This was something that I shouldn't bother God with. He's got bigger things to deal with. Oh, my friend, you have failed to understand what a good and loving Father is, who's perfect and omniscient. There is nothing too small in your life that shouldn't be given to God. Oh, I don't want to bother God with the small stuff. I'll save the big stuff for Him. Or I don't want to cash in, asking a favor here. Have you ever done that? I want to save whatever favors I need from God. I want to save it for the big stuff. You have totally misunderstood what it is to be in a father-son, a father-daughter relationship from the good and perfect loving Father. He says, if you will humble yourself before me, He'll lift you up. But how you humble yourself is by casting your care on Him. I don't know if any of you are fishermen or fisherwomen. There's a reel that is called the bait caster reel. It's got an open face on it. And it's designed so you can throw the bait, the lure, a long way, and you cast it. And you cast that lure sometimes 100 plus yards with that special bait caster reel. In this day and age of the first century, I believe Peter understood this word to cast. We may not catch it as much now in 2024, but he actually, what did he do for a living before he became fully vocational in his ministry? He was what? A fisherman. And he wasn't a fisherman just by casting a reel. What did he cast? He cast a net. And so his daily duty, usually all night, was to cast a net. When I was young, when I was flats fishing, when I was a younger man, I'd finally learned, it took a long time, but I finally learned how to throw a cast net. And they would spread out into this big 8-10 foot net that would catch bait. And so I had to learn how to throw how many pieces over my shoulder, have a part in my hand, and sometimes I'd have one in my mouth. And if I could throw it just right, it would just spread out over this whole huge area in front of me and drop and catch the bait fish that I would need. But if I did it now, I'd probably throw myself in the boat, out of the boat, because I just hadn't done it in so long. But we cast or throw our cares upon the Lord. When Jesus first met them, they were casting their net into the sea, all the disciples, especially Peter. They were casting their net in the sea, for they were fishermen. Follow me, he told them, Jesus said, and I'll make you fish for people. There was one time when the religious leaders were getting on to Jesus and Peter. They had not yet paid the temple tax. They had not paid their dues for coming into the temple. And so they asked Peter and said, hey, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? And so Peter, he was lost for words. He didn't know what to say, but he said, yeah. He said, so they went to the house. Jesus spoke to him and said, what do you think, Simon? Where do the earthly kings collect their tariffs or taxes? And so there was a great lesson there I won't go into. But he said, so they won't be offended. Go to the sea, cast in a fish hook, and take the first fish that you catch. And when you open his mouth, what are you going to find in it? This is the craziest thing. You found a coin. Take it and give it to them for me and you. Jesus did that just to show his power over everything, that money was not an object for him. Sometimes we get burdened by the need for money. Sometimes we get burdened by thinking we not have enough. And so Jesus said, I'm just going to have you go catch one fish, and you'll get the money out of that fish's mouth. That's the craziest thing. But he cast into the sea. And so Peter lived his life casting. He knew what it was like to cast into the ocean. He knew what it was like to throw. And so today, when we say cast our cares upon the Lord, that word literally means to throw. That in the day when he was shouted as Hosanna on Palm Sunday, they threw blankets over the donkey. They just threw it on the donkey. When people threw a net, they cast the net. They cast the blanket on the donkey. They cast the net. And so for you and I today, he tells us in 1 Peter 5:7, if we humble ourselves before God, number one, he'll lift us up. But humbling ourselves before God actually talks about casting, throwing our cares on him. Do you know that your and my worry and my anxiety and trying to figure it out on my own is actually a source of pride? That hits home with every one of us, doesn't it? When I thought about that, it actually hurts to say that, because I know how many times I'm trying to figure out a problem or make a decision on my own. That I'm saying, oh, I got to figure this out, man. I got to use my IQ, or I got to use my problem-solving skills. And he says, humble yourselves by casting your cares upon the Lord. I believe the greatest way that you can live in ongoing humility in your life is that you learn to, moment by moment, throw all of your cares onto the Lord. Do you know what that teaches you in the process? Because you learn it in real time, over and over repeatedly. When you cast your cares upon the Lord, what are you saying in essence? I can't. I don't fully understand. I don't know what's best. I don't know the future. I don't know what tomorrow holds. And so, Lord, I'm casting my cares. I'm throwing it on you because I don't have the answer. I can't do it. And the reason why we can cast our cares on him is why? Because he cares for us. There's one translation that I heard, it was more of a commentary, but it said it this way: we can be carefree because he is careful. Isn't that good stuff? We can be free of care. We can be. We're usually not. Most of us here are all worked up with worry and anxiety and struggles, and that's why the Bible repeatedly tells us not to be anxious and not to worry and not to be afraid. Why? Because we are. Because we get that way. It's our human nature. But when we throw our cares upon him, it's actually a reminder of how we humble ourselves. When you say, no, I'm not going to pray about it yet, or prayers, how many times is prayer the first decision? Rarely. Usually prayer is the last decision after it all falls apart and we're hitting our head against the wall and we're doing the face palm. And it just shows our pride. Because when we worry and when we consume ourselves with trying to figure it out, we're not casting our cares upon the Lord, and it's actually the opposite of humility. And I'm learning that in my life. So today, are you casting your cares upon the Lord? When you humble yourself under the mighty hand of God by casting your cares upon him, he cares for you.